So today we are talking about the topic of anger, either yourself experiencing anger or certainly the anger of those close to you. What I want you to understand today, if you take away nothing else, this is your key takeaway from your therapist friend Dawn, is that anger is always secondary. So I'm going to say that again. Anger is always a secondary emotion. So what does that mean, like a secondary emotion? What do you mean, Dawn? A secondary emotion means that there's something more primary, or you could say more true or honest underneath of it that's fueling it. Once you have this insight of anger being secondary, a whole new world of how to relate well with other people in your relationships opens up for you, because what you realize is that when you see anger, you're not actually seeing the true heart of the situation, and so you don't have to get hooked by it. And we all know what it's like to get hooked. We get triggered, we become angry, we become defensive, and so if we can listen for the primary emotion when someone is angry with us, or if we can go ahead and when we're angry, really do some digging as to what's really underneath that anger, you are gonna find that your conflicts get resolved so much better, and there's so much more softness and tenderness in the relationships as you're working through the anger, because there's this insight of like, ooh, there's a more vulnerable emotion underneath. Well, hi, I'm Dawn from Living by Heart. I am here to inspire you to connect more deeply with God and with your family. Let me give you a few other names for anger, and I think you might be surprised. So some of the other names or more primary emotions that can be underneath anger we have worry, frustration, fear, sadness, disappointment, hurt, shame, embarrassment, anxiety, guilt, and jealousy. So these emotions can all be underneath anger when people are expressing it to you or when you feel angry. So let's start with the example of when you feel angry. When you feel like something hooks you to the point where you just explode or fly off the handle, the question to really ask yourself right away, as soon as you can possibly do it, even if it requires leaving the situation so you don't throw something at someone, is to really get alone, and you can ask yourself and you can involve God and ask God to help you by saying, what is going on underneath my anger right now? What am I really feeling? And my best advice for people who are able to identify it is when you go back to that person, hopefully in a few minutes after you've calmed down, that is the emotion that I really want you to express, the more vulnerable one. We never fight, right, Ben?
Right.
We never get angry at each other or like never shout or...
Of course.
We always express the more vulnerable emotion, right?
Yes.
If I'm super, super angry, let's say with my child, because they've done something, let's say that I gave them an instruction and they totally didn't follow it for the 100th time, and I'm just completely exasperated, and it was really important to me to get this done. Maybe they were supposed to carry in the groceries because it was 100 degrees outside, and they sat on the front porch after Instacart delivered them and they spoiled. And this child might have a history of, not being responsible. And maybe this is something that you've worked on and mentioned 1,000 times. And so let's just go with that example, that you're so angry because you feel so frustrated, hurt, disappointed, embarrassed, like, maybe you've become fearful for his future of like, oh my gosh, if he can't even handle bringing in the groceries when it's 105 degrees outside and doing one simple thing that I ask, how is he ever gonna hold down a job? How is he ever gonna have a successful relationship? And we go into the future. So instead of doing all of that, another way to communicate how we really feel is to get to the heart of it ourselves first internally, and then go to the person, like I was saying, and express that to them directly. So that could look like this. Johnny, when you neglected to bring in the groceries during the 105-degree heat that had been dropped off and they spoiled, I felt so frustrated and disrespected and disappointed. And I actually feel kind of concerned for your future because this is the 500th time that you haven't followed through. So please understand that this is where I'm coming from. And so expressing that is a totally different ballgame than blowing up and just getting so frustrated and never really resolving anything. Another example that I see commonly in my practice is between couples. And so just this week, I met with a couple who just really weren't seeing eye to eye. And the wife of the couple has felt just repeatedly a breach of trust in terms of her husband's follow through on things that they have together discussed, in terms of how they're going to communicate to their kids about something or what might be shared. And the husband has continued to let her down in this way, but her anger is all she can really get to. And so in our session together, we talked about what would happen if she could get to the heart of her anger and express that instead. Would she be able to remain more calm? Would she have more constructivity or productivity in resolving that conflict with her husband if she could get to the heart of how she was feeling? So instead of flying off the handle, I challenged her to instead try this. So she said, when you failed to follow through yet again in communicating with our kids the way that we had talked about doing, I felt hurt. I felt scared because I feel like if I can't trust you to do that, when can I ever trust you to protect our relationship or set boundaries or speak the truth when we've agreed on what we're going to present to them? They have a difficult situation with one of their other kids, and so it's been really difficult for them to walk this out because, of course, there's a lot of growth on both of their parts. But when he failed her, she was able to get to that. And you know what? When she expressed the hurt and this fear and the genuine concern for their relationship and their marriage remaining protected from any toxic outside influences that they've been experiencing, he was actually able to hear her better. And so it was a beautiful thing that took place. He was able then to respond to the fear and to the anxiety and to the hurt. And he was able to ask for her forgiveness, and he was able to validate and say, oh my goodness, I can totally see how you would feel afraid, and I want to reassure you that my heart is totally with you, is totally with our marriage. And it was just a flub on my part. My heart is actually very much with you, and I had just lost sight or lost track of, how we had agreed to communicate. So that is a success story of how, when we really are able to get to the heart of it, how it can really produce wonderful conflict resolution. But the other thing that I would say about this is when it's somebody else, that's a whole different scenario too. So when we have somebody come to us who is angry with us for one reason or another, let's stick with the marriage example. They're upset with us and they come at us kind of in a attack mode. Does anybody have attack mode at their house? We have to recognize, oh my goodness, this person is experiencing some intense emotion and they're very angry, and I need to have compassion because I know that underneath this big stuff that's kind of overwhelming to me at the moment is some very important emotion that I need to speak to. And so this example is if somebody is angry with you, how you can respond. My best advice is to immediately try to imagine what is the emotion underneath the anger. So let's say that it's the teenager who's upset with the mom because she cut off his phone plan because he went over his allotted minutes. How could she respond? She could say, I see that you're disappointed about the decision I made to follow through on the boundaries we had with your phone. And I imagine that that's super hard for you. She's cool as a cucumber. She's not hooked by his anger or his disappointment or his embarrassment over losing this privilege because he's the one that went over on his minutes. So I think that this can help us really be more constructive and truly love others better, because we're really addressing the heart underneath the anger. Anger is what we see, but there's so much more going on underneath of that actually needs kindness and softness and needs a bit of ministry from us. And so if we can just call it out and acknowledge it and validate it, it brings the relationship forward, and it helps that person realize, oh my gosh, they see me, she understands me, she heard me. And then the anger isn't necessary. Some people feel like they have to get big with their anger in order to be heard, and that is not helpful at all. Anyone who's experiencing anger needs to be heard, seen, and understood. So I hope that this has helped you. I challenge you this week that when you feel angry or even irritated, or maybe when somebody in your family expresses some anger or irritation, I would challenge you to try to find, it's almost like buried treasure. See if you can find the emotion that's underneath that anger and name it. You know, that's the other piece, is to offer some compassion. Offer some compassion for where that person is at, because we know that when people are angry, they feel like something of themselves has not been honored. And so we want to honor it for them in that moment. We don't want to kowtow to drama, of course, but we do want to see the true heart of that person and have compassion for them, because just like you and me, they're just a human being who is struggling with something. And we all know that those days come along for each one of us. And kindness and tenderness is one of the best ways for people to just really feel loved. And that is one of our main goals in relationship. So I hope that you have found this video helpful, and please let me know in the comments below any anger tips that you have, if you've been able to identify any of the underlying emotions to your anger or to those around you, and if you've had any success with, you know, naming it and showing compassion for it. And I will see you on the next video.